Welcome everyone to today's webinar about performance management and mental health. We're going to keep this one really short and sharp and try not to take up your whole lunch break. So we'll try and give you some time back in your day, try and keep this one to 30 minutes. This topic can be quite nuanced and really specific to the individual and each unique situation. So because we only have 30 minutes and because it can be quite complex, we unfortunately won't be having a Q&A today. But I do encourage you to reach out to the workplace team at Black Dog Institute if you want to discuss building the capability of your leaders in this area or any other supports or resources that we recommend. So we'll start off with a little acknowledgement of country. Black Dog Institute acknowledges the Beti clan of the Dharawal Nation, who are traditional custodians of the land on which Black Dog Institute is situated. The work we do at Black Dog Institute stretches far across this land, and we acknowledge and pay respect to all First Nations peoples and communities and their continuing connection to land, waters, and community. We recognise that their customs and culture have nurtured this land since the first sunrise, and for the benefit of all who live, work, and learn in country today. We pay respect to elders past, present, and across time, and from all nations across this country. We recognise that through lived experiences and the ongoing commitment to caring for collective social and emotional well-being, First Nations peoples and communities have helped guide the research and resources at Black Dog Institute. So my name's Rebecca. I'm a Workplace Engagement Manager at the Black Dog Institute. And for some quick background on BDI, in case you've not worked with us before, Black Dog Institute is a not-for-profit medical research institute, and we investigate mental health across the lifespan. At BDI, our goal is to create a mentally healthier world by improving mental health outcomes for all Australians. And we do this by using our research to underpin the education and support that we provide to workplaces. I'd like to give a very warm welcome to our presenter today, Beti Kordanovski. Beti is a registered psychologist with 20 years experience. Throughout her career, she's provided education, training, and coaching in a variety of government, community, corporate, and private settings in mental health and in suicide prevention. Beti's areas of expertise include occupational rehabilitation and workplace mental health and well-being. Beti has extensive experience in undertaking psychological assessments and fitness for work assessments, along with supporting employees and organisations through the return to work process following psychological injury. She incorporates her extensive clinical experience into organisational settings via consultancy and training. Thank you for joining us today, Beti.
Thank you for having me.
So I guess a good place for us to get started is probably some understanding and awareness of the prevalence of mental health issues. So how common are mental health issues overall, and how prevalent are they in a workplace?
Yeah, so overall, it's about 1 in 5 Australians who will experience a mental health challenge in any year. Within our workplace population, it's 1 in 6. So 1 in 2 of us will actually experience a mental health challenge in our lifetime. So chances are that someone in your team will be dealing with this, whether or not they actually disclose. We also know that workers' compensation claims due to psychological injury are a rising cost to businesses. The number of psychological injury claims has actually doubled over the last 6 years. By comparison, all other injuries have grown by just 16% during the same period. 88% of workers who suffer from physical injuries on average have returned to work within about 13 weeks, but 40% of workers with psychological injuries are still languishing in the system after 1 year off work. So they're still separated from their workplace and are more likely to be socially isolated, which we know is a problem. So psychological claims now make up 12% of total workers' compensation claims, but 38% of the total cost. The average cost, by the way, of a psychological injury claim has increased from $146,000 back in 2019 to 20 to just over $288,000 over the last financial year. So it's a massive cost.
Yeah, so it also sounds like it's quite likely then that someone or multiple people in your workplace will be experiencing a mental health challenge at any given time. So tell us, how can mental health issues present within a workplace?
Yeah, so changes in someone's mental health can certainly impact their behavior. You might notice changes in someone's mood, their appearance. There can be cognitive decline, so forgetfulness, difficulty focusing, potentially as well increased absenteeism is something you might notice. Excuse me, sorry. Changes in people's behavior can then lead to changes in their productivity and also performance issues. One example of this would be presenteeism, which is a huge cost to organizations, but it's actually really hard to measure. So presenteeism is particularly complex when it's due to mental ill health, where symptoms might not be as visible as physical ailments, but it can significantly affect an individual's ability to function effectively. So I have had numerous clients over the years who have experienced symptoms of anxiety, maybe depression for months, sometimes even longer, and all undetected in the workplace. Some of those symptoms, things like persistent feelings of sadness, lack of energy, difficulty concentrating, can make it challenging for people to complete their tasks efficiently and to meet deadlines. Clients often report that they find themselves, staring at the computer screen, for instance, or maybe even they're unable to start on tasks. Some even feel a sense of dread about the quality of their work because they know they're actually not performing their best. Despite their deteriorating mental health, people generally continue to attend work every day. And quite often that's driven by a fear of being perceived as weak or maybe feeling like they're not committed to their job. Unfortunately, this can exacerbate symptoms and it makes people feel that they cannot really afford to take a day off to focus on their mental health.
Yeah, so obviously that's a really tough situation for that individual who's going through that. But how does that individual situation then impact their team that they work with or the organization that they work for?
Yeah, so in terms of the consequences for the organization, whilst people may be physically present at work, their mental health issues significantly reduce their productivity. And then, of course, overall output will decline. The quality of work suffers, which can lead to mistakes, and that can then require additional time and perhaps resources to correct. The decreased performance will generally also affect the entire team, with colleagues having to pick up the slack, which can lead to increased workloads for other people and potentially to resentment as well. So this can create a tense and uncomfortable work environment. It can affect the morale of the whole team. Not to mention the reduced productivity and quality of work will impact the company's bottom line.
Yeah, so it sounds like this can be really impactful across the board at all levels of an organization. So can you tell us a little bit more about how mental health and performance management can often be intertwined?
Yeah, so untreated or unsupported mental health conditions can result in changes in behavior, like the ones that I mentioned earlier. And these changes in behavior mean that mental health challenges can often play out as a performance management issue. The performance management process itself can actually be troubling to someone's well-being, and this could potentially exacerbate any existing mental health issues. So to give you an example, a few years ago, I had a client who was a senior health and safety advisor. He had been a great performer. He'd been in that role for many years. At some point, so I guess during his career, he developed anxiety. Now, he knew he wasn't himself. He knew something was wrong. He just didn't know what it was. He just thought it was stress, kept attending work. He was doing 12 to 14-hour work days. There was lots of travel for him as well in his role and in a really high pressure work environment. Now, part of his role as well included speaking at the pre-start meetings each morning. As a result of his anxiety, he was actually unable to undertake this part of his role. And you guys might be aware public speaking is the number one fear for most people. So you can imagine with the underlying anxiety the impact this would have had. So basically for about 5 weeks, he didn't speak at the pre-start meetings, right? He simply couldn't do that part of his role, which led to his manager giving him an ultimatum: either do the pre-starts or you will get sacked. Now, the consequences for that employee were immense. So about 2 years off work, he had to have inpatient treatment at a clinic, along with ongoing regular appointments with a psychologist and a psychiatrist. The financial burden of all of that, so those medical costs were huge, not to mention the impact across the board on this man's life. So his marriage, their children, and we know that when our mental health suffers, it will actually impact our entire life. It affects every area. All of this, of course, at the same time as having lost the connection to his workplace and the collegial support, right, that most of us would get from work, on top of a reduction in income as well, right, from being off work. Now, if that manager had raised the performance issue in a more appropriate way, it may have possibly led to a disclosure of mental ill health, or at the very least, it may have led to an open conversation with that employee. So potentially we could have supported that employee at that point. If we support someone's mental health, this may actually change their behavior. It could even improve their performance and may eliminate the need for performance management. This can certainly reduce the impact of a potential mental health condition on that person, but also how quickly they recover from that condition.
Yeah, that's a really impactful story. Thank you for sharing that, Beti. So I'm quickly going to share a framework that we're going to talk about in this next point here. So it is really good to understand that mental health and performance management do often go hand in hand, as shown by that example there. So can you tell us, Beti, about some of the complexities that exist for leaders or for organizations when it comes to managing mental health and performance management?
Yeah, so I guess early intervention and prevention are key, right? This is what we always talk about. If leaders address issues with mental health quickly, they may not become performance issues, which means the outcomes are better for everyone. Sometimes a manager may begin the performance management conversation only for a mental health challenge to be disclosed, and we know that that can happen. Sometimes a team member might be reluctant or unwilling to disclose their mental health status until they're in a performance management situation where they feel they need to explain, I guess, their changes in behavior or in their performance. Once mental health is brought up, performance management conversations need to stop, and the focus needs to be brought back to mental health. So basically, we must put employee well-being first and ensure that we do not cause any further harm to that employee. And if we look at the mentally healthy workplaces framework, so that's what you've got on the slide there, there are 3 pillars that we should think about when we're managing mental health in the workplace, right? So the first pillar is to protect. So this is about wide-scale strategies you can implement, or I guess things you can do to mitigate psychosocial hazards, so to minimize harm across the organization, right? So protect people's well-being. The second pillar is about promoting. So this is about strategies that go beyond just harm minimization, and they focus on interventions we can use to promote enhanced well-being in the workplace, right? So promote the positives, promote the good things. And then the third pillar is about responding. So this is about strategies or actions that are delivered in response to a worker experiencing distress, right? So the interventions are aimed at workers who are already unwell. Basically, we're taking action to support that individual. So interventions that you implement from across all 3 pillars will help support workers throughout the mental health spectrum. So, for example, in a situation where a worker is suffering from a mental health challenge and it's contributing to a performance issue, that means that they're sitting on the ill health end of the mental health spectrum. In this case, interventions from the promote and respond pillars are most relevant, right, at that point, because we want to respond to their distress and we want to promote their well-being. Excuse me, sorry. So we ideally want our teams operating at the other end of that spectrum, right? We want people as healthy workers. We want them thriving. So it's important that we not only think about actions we can take that fall under that respond pillar to support our unwell workers, but also we want to consider how we, as leaders and as an organisation, can protect and promote the health of our team before they become unwell. So this goes back to the point about early intervention. Planning interventions across all three of these pillars, right, of the mentally healthy framework can help you potentially prevent issues from occurring and certainly from becoming bigger issues down the track.
Yeah, that's really good to understand. Thank you, Beti. Speaking of unwell workers, I should have said at the beginning, thank you for joining us, even though you are unwell, Beti. I'm very sorry, and I'm glad that you're getting through this without having to cough too much. So it is very good to understand that there are lots of different ways that we as leaders or as organizations as a whole can positively impact our team's mental health. Could you tell us then why it's important that we try and successfully manage that intersection of mental health and performance management in our workplaces?
Yeah, I guess, first of all, failure to manage this successfully can actually cause more harm to individuals and more complexities for the organizations as well. So if you're managing a team of 6, for example, stats show that one person will be dealing with a mental health challenge at the time. And this will be impacting teams, remember, regardless of whether or not it's been disclosed as well. So if we do manage this well, we can improve outcomes for the individual. At the end of the day, happy, healthy people mean more productive people for the business. And as mentioned earlier, the performance management process itself can actually be quite stressful for all parties involved. So being able to prevent situations escalating to that point of performance management is again beneficial for everyone. The improved outcomes for individuals will also have flow-on effects, I guess, positive flow-on effects for organizations. Supported teams are high-performing teams. It is also important to consider the legal implications here. So the Work Health Safety Act stipulates that we need to manage mental health issues in the same way we manage physical health issues, always from a health management approach rather than performance management. So basically, people's well-being must always come first.
Yeah, that's really good to know. I think it's important that we always take the focus back to people's mental health and treating people like people. So as leaders, it's important that we understand the reasons why we want to manage this situation well, but could you tell us really briefly, how do we balance having a performance management conversation when there is a mental health component involved?
Yeah, so if a mental health challenge is disclosed, it doesn't mean that we cannot performance manage that employee. However, it is a delicate balance, and it's important that managers have both the skills and the confidence to know how to navigate this situation in a way that prioritizes the well-being of that employee. It's very important that managers know how to support staff when they're at different stages of that mental health spectrum that I was referring to earlier as well. So when changes in behavior are first noticed, that might indicate that a worker is at risk, or maybe they've already are having an issue with their mental health. Having the skills and confidence to have a supportive conversation at that point is key, right? So remember, we want to have this conversation sooner rather than later. The basics around having a supportive conversation are crucial, and approaching the situation with empathy and with genuine concern is important.
Sorry, Beti.
Sorry. So skills-based training and individual support for leaders are really valuable tools for your organizations, right, in order to build a leader's confidence in handling these situations.
Yeah, so I think that's a really important point around making sure that we're comfortable having supportive conversations with our team. But I think from what you've said, it sounds like this can be a really tough situation to manage well if we're not prepared. So what practical steps do you think organizations can take to manage this intersection of performance management and mental health?
So I guess to start with, actually creating an organization-wide environment of support will make managing mental health and performance management easier for everyone. So a top-down approach is ideal. Basically, upskilling leaders in this area is an important first step. Creating a positive environment makes managing these situations simpler and also safer. Leaders need basic skills and confidence to have supportive conversations, right? This can come from practical skills-based training like Managing for Team Wellbeing that Black Dog Institute offers. Skills-based training will lead to changes in leader behaviour, hopefully creating an environment where team members feel safe having tough conversations with leaders. To address the more complex scenarios around mental health and performance management, leaders need to be comfortable with the basic skills around supportive conversations, but they can also benefit from learning additional skills that come from practical training, like in navigating conversations, for instance. It's important to note that managing these complex situations can also be tough on people leaders. Like, that's a lot that's expected of you as leaders. If you do have an employee assistance provider within your organisation, as a leader, please use it or encourage your leaders to use, particularly if you have the manager support service. So manager support through EAP can help leaders to prepare for challenging conversations like performance management conversations or meetings, I guess. The manager support service can also help leaders to debrief and to manage their own emotions around performance management. Equipping leaders to identify and address issues before they progress is key. Remember, early intervention all the way. So upskilling leaders with interactive case-based workshops links back to that, right? So early intervention and prevention. Using the mentally healthy workplaces framework that we touched on, it's important for organisations to develop strategies, remember, in the protect, promote and respond pillars across the different levels of intervention. So it's important for you to have a look at your systems and policy level, but also your organisation level, the job level, and individual level, and identify whether there are any gaps in your strategy. So developing an environment of safety and support for your teams is the ideal outcome.
Thanks for that, Beti. There's some fantastic steps there I think we can take at an organisational or a workplace level. But could you also tell us maybe what tips you'd give to leaders themselves who are looking to better manage mental health and performance management situations?
Yeah, so first of all, have regular check-ins with your team and make sure you incorporate wellbeing into the conversations just as a normal point of discussion, right, in the day-to-day. Always approach conversations with curiosity and empathy. If you do notice a change in someone's behaviour, you should be having the discussion with them as early as you can, and you should be checking in with that person often, right? It's mental health. It's not just going to be one conversation. And as we mentioned earlier, sometimes supporting someone with a mental health issue early enough can potentially prevent the development of a performance management issue. So definitely support the individual. If someone has disclosed a mental health issue, remember the focus needs to be on them and their health. Performance management would be a secondary priority. Evaluate what systems of support you have for that individual. Do you have an EAP? Do the team know about it and how to access it or how to use it? Are there other internal supports your organisation has in place for someone who needs help with their mental health? Do you have same-day or crisis support contacts available in the event that someone does need urgent care? So we're lucky enough in this country to have lots of great free online resources, telephone numbers, things like that. Talk openly with your people about reasonable adjustments and how you can also accommodate individual needs so people know that they'll be supported. Consult with your team members as well about how you can enable them to feel their best and to perform their best at work. And encourage the team to embrace self-care, right? Can you have self-care plans put in place while the team member is actually feeling well? Because then they can go back to that and reference that when they need support. As a leader, it's really important that you try to openly model self-care practices, right? To break down the stigma that might exist. When you're in a leadership role, it is really important to be a good role model, right? Because people do watch you. Also, evaluate systems of support that you have in place for yourself as a leader. Make sure you have check-ins with your own manager and you have space to talk about your own well-being, your human beings too. Evaluate other avenues of support within the workplace. Again, do you engage with the EAP or with your manager support service? Do you have, I don't know, a mentor or someone else you trust you can talk to? Look for guidance, look for feedback as a leader, invite honest and open discussions about how you can better support your team. And consider formal training to upskill yourself, right? We're not born knowing this stuff, I guess. So remember, skills-based training like the options Black Dog Institute provides can help you to develop the knowledge and the confidence to have these nuanced conversations.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Beti. I love those practical tips there that leaders can start to have a think about. That does bring us to the end of today's session. Thank you, Beti, for powering through with your poor sore throat. Thank you again, Beti, for sharing your experiences and your recommendations and your advice today. We really appreciate your time and your expertise on this very complex topic. I think it's also incredibly important that we try and manage this at all levels of our organisation. So some great tips to take away there. What I'm going to do now is share my screen and show you a couple of the resources that we mentioned today. Caroline can also pop these in the chat for everybody. So this is the resources that we talked about today. So we've got the Black Dog Institute Mental Health Toolkit. So the Mental Health Toolkit includes information on understanding psychosocial risks and creating a mentally healthy workplace. And it also touches on that framework that we were talking about. And that second link below it is the paper that framework has come from. So feel free to have a look at those. I've got some really valuable information there, and they'll expand a little bit on what we talked about today. I'm also going to show you a QR code. So if you have a spare moment, we would really appreciate it if you could scan that QR code that's on your screen there and fill out just a really quick survey about today's session so we can get your thoughts and your very important feedback. And please feel free to tell us more about what you want to hear about in the future, any other topics that are really important to you, and we'll see what we can do. Thank you, everybody. You will receive a link to the recording of today's session within the next week or so. But if you do have any questions or you wanted to speak about the resources or the tools that we talked about today, please reach out to the workplace team at Black Dog Institute. So that's workplace@blackdog.org.au. I will pop that up on the screen for you. Sorry. Let me grab that. So if you did want to speak to somebody at Black Dog about anything that we talked about today, like I was saying, please reach out. Let me pop it on the screen. That would help. There it is. Hopefully we've got that up. So that email there, workplace@blackdog.org.au, is where you can get in touch with me or any of the other workplace engagement managers, and we can talk about resources and support or upskilling your team in this area. You can chat through your workplace and anything that might suit. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And thank you again, Beti. We really appreciate you sharing your expertise. We hope to see everybody today in the next installment of our Expert Insights series for workplaces. We'll give you back half an hour, hopefully, of your lunch break today.
Thanks, everyone.